Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sterling Heights Community Center. We're going to get this started. Phil, if you guys mind in the back, we're going to get started now. Thank you. This is the Sterling Heights Annual Strategic Planning Session. We are here at the Community Center, and we're about to kick things off. So, first thing on our agenda is this call to order, and I would like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski. Here. Mrs. Koski.
Present.
Mr. Radke.
Here.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Present.
Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Yarko.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Council, we need approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So as I said, we have a long day today, but it'll be a good day, very productive day. It always has been in the past. We have strategic presentations from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool, and members of the city administration. So at this time, I will turn it over to our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good morning, council and audience members. We're really excited to present the strategic planning for 2023 today. As you all know, strategic planning is incredibly important for the city. It's the prelude to the budget that's forthcoming. It gives City Council an opportunity to set forth goals and objectives, not only for the next year, but it could be for the next few years, depending on some of the initiatives that come out of today's session. And as City Council knows, last year we had two strategic planning sessions. We had one in January around the same time, and then we had a follow-up session in June. And we had the follow-up session in June in large part because there were so many good ideas that came out of the January session that we needed to prioritize those and attempt to put some time frames on them and so on. And we've been diligently working on those priority items that we identified in June. And what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and talk about those. But Mayor, as you indicated, we have a long day, but the good news is the presentations we have a number of excellent presentations, and they'll go quite smooth. And after each presentation, the audience members and City Council will have an opportunity to ask questions and offer additional thoughts and so on. And then toward the end of the agenda, which I'm really excited about this because we haven't done it in recent history, we have a roundtable discussion with legislators, some of which have already joined us here this morning at the county, state, and federal level. So I'm really happy that they were able to join us and talk about some of the initiatives we'll be discussing. But what I'd like to do starting out is just draw your attention to the screen, again going back to the June session that we had last summer and looking at some of the items that the City Council prioritized. And I refer to the green zone because these are the items that you said you really want to get done in the next year or two. And then the items in the red zone, if you will, are items that we'll continue to discuss and revisit in the future and try to get them in the green zone if that's a consensus at council as we move forward. But I want to give you an update on each one of these. First, beginning with trees in the right-of-way. I want to spend a little bit of time here because this is a really important initiative with our sustainability plan, which, as the council knows, the Sustainability Commission's been working very diligently, working hand in hand with administration and council members, charting a more sustainable future. And what we talked about in June is the fact that we really have to address the tree canopy in Sterling Heights. We have one of the lowest tree canopies of any city in southeastern Michigan, which is not something that we should be proud of. So we've identified an objective to reforest the neighborhoods in Sterling Heights. Some of the long-term residents here will know that the emerald ash borer disease that was prevalent in the metro area of 15, 20 years ago caused great devastation. And in Sterling Heights, we had to remove almost 12,000 diseased trees from the emerald ash borer disease. So we have many parts of the community and neighborhoods that are completely barren. So City Council identified this as a priority, that we have to work on a plan to reforest the neighborhoods for so many reasons. Not only is it important for sustainability, it's important for property values, curb appeal, creates safer neighborhoods. A lot of studies on the impact of trees and safety of communities, but especially home values and aesthetic looks of neighborhoods. Not to mention, obviously, the value of trees to the environment. So administration has put forth a comprehensive report in your packet today. And by the way, the packets are available to the general public. They can see all the same material that you're looking at this morning. And the idea behind the tree report, and we'll be reporting back to City Council at a forthcoming City Council meeting we expect in March, and there'll be, I expect, some robust discussion on this. The idea with the tree program is over a 10-year period of time, we'll replant almost 12,000 trees in the neighborhoods. It would be a mandatory program, and the cost would be around $4 million, of which we have about $1 million in ARPA funding we can allocate to the program. But as it turns out, the way that we would have to pay for this, there's really two mechanisms that the City Council could consider. One is a millage rate, the other is a special assessment. We focus more on the special assessment. We think it's a little more manageable. Essentially, the trees would cost around $300. Obviously, the city gets a good deal when we buy them in bulk and mass quantities through economies of scale. $300 is a pretty reasonable price, considering that includes the warranty, planting by the city's contractor, and so on. The special assessment over a 5-year period, if a resident chose that instead of paying a lump sum, would be about $5 to $10 a month, depending on whether that particular home required 1 or 2 trees. A corner home obviously would require 2 trees. So within 10 years then the city would be reforested, and within 20, 30 years or so you would see a dramatic difference in our neighborhoods, and our tree canopy would obviously increase. We're currently at about 17 to 19%. We really should be in the mid 20% range. So this is an important objective. So I simply call attention to this because it's in your packet, and I'm sure over the next month or so you'll have a chance to review it in great detail, and then look forward to the forthcoming agenda item in March. And then some other items that you see in the green zone, so to speak, is a business licensing update. The City Council desired to waive fees for nonprofits, and you've already adopted that ordinance change, and that's in place now. And speaking of sustainability, there was also a desire to increase our requirements for prohibiting front yards from being paved over. In many cases, we do not have regulations now for discouraging residents from entirely paving over a front yard. So this new ordinance that's ready to go, we'll be bringing this to you in the next couple of months, would prohibit this sort of activity. Now, there would be some exceptions. You know, you could enlarge a driveway, you could put in a U-shaped driveway and so on. It's a little more restrictive, and we're looking at more porous type material that would allow for that. But essentially, in the name of sustainability and creating difficult situations for neighbors and so on, we want to discourage front yard paving. Another major identity or objective the City Council set forth was creating more of a identity for the city of Sterling Heights. There's so many good things going on, We're blessed with outstanding schools, 2 great school districts, not to mention many private schools, many houses of worship. Quality of life in Sterling Heights is very high. We have a very safe community. We have a very robust business community. The local economy is very strong. There's a lot going on, and there's more we can do to promote all the fine attributes of Sterling Heights, and that's going to require a concerted public information education campaign. And that's important because we want to continue to keep our businesses here. We want to be able to attract new businesses, and that's especially the case for families too. We want to keep families here. We want to keep seniors here, but we want to attract new folks to Sterling Heights as well. Sustaining the vibrancy that we're currently experiencing. So City Council allocated funding for this initiative last December. The RFPs are currently being reviewed, and we hope to have a definite proposal for City Council to approve shortly in the next 60 days or so. The next item is far more complicated. We have a comprehensive report in your packet this morning centered on more affordable, attainable housing in the city. As we all know, affordability is very, very difficult in communities across the country right now, including Sterling Heights. Some new homes that are under construction, many of them are $300 plus into the $400 range. In fact, many are in the $600,000 range. So when we talk about attracting new families, younger individuals to Sterling Heights too, that becomes a real challenge when we have an attainable and affordable housing issue in the city. So this is not an easy issue to tackle. But in the report that we've submitted, which again is available to the public, we do outline some objectives and some initiatives, and we look forward to City Council's feedback on these items. And finally, when we talk about the green zone, there's been a big push, and rightfully so, to expand our non-motorized transportation program, making sure that we're closing all the sidewalk gaps that we can throughout the city, which we have right now out to bid, one of our largest sidewalk programs in the city's history, where we're going to not only be repairing the sidewalk network we have as we do every year, but we're also going to be closing more gaps of sidewalk across the city, which has been a very successful program. We don't have that many more gaps to go. Our sidewalk network is around 90% complete, but we're still working diligently to make sure it's 100% complete. A part of this initiative of connectivity and making sure that residents can get to every area of the community, especially our trail systems, is creating mid-block crossings to make some of our roadways safer for pedestrians. This is more of a pilot program than anything else. We've started a couple of these crossings. One that's not on our pictures here is at 15 in Van Dyke. We've had some problems over there. This is just the mid-block crossing is over by the Holiday Inn Express. So that would be east of Van Dyke on 15 Mile Road. So we're going to be monitoring that over the next couple of years, see how that goes, and to see if we can apply that same amenity to other parts of the city. Where we do have mid-block crossings in other areas of the city, we're making sure we get the proper lighting up, flashing strobe lights and the like, to make sure that those who are crossing are doing so in a safe manner and highly visible to motorists. So the mid-block crossing program is an offshoot of our non-motorized transportation plan, and we'll see how some of these test areas work over the next couple of years. Now, if we could go back to the chart, I want to focus on a couple of items that are still in the red zone that may result in some discussion and through collaboration over the next year or two might get up into the green zone. One item we are working on is a south pathway at Moravian Park. Parks and Rec directors working diligently with DT to get that formal easement agreement and get more of an established walkway through there. Right now, it's kind of a cow path walkway, if you will. And then if you move further down, you'll see detached dwelling as an ancillary use. That particular item will more naturally jump into the green zone as we think about more low-income, affordable, attainable housing in the city, because there is a direct correlation between those two items. So I wanted to give this update so City Council and the general public knows that we're working hard to follow up on the ideas and objectives that are brought forth at strategic planning. And you can see some of them you can knock off in 30, 60, 90 days, and others it takes a year or two to get them accomplished. And they also require partnering with all of our friends at the county, the state, and the federal level as well. So with all that in mind, we are ready to move on to our first presentation of the morning, and that is from our City Development Director, Jason Castor, who's going to be talking about a new and exciting commercial center improvement program.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Vanderpool, Mark Koszubski, and those in the audience with us today. I'd like to share with you a new property maintenance program aimed to beautify and improve the businesses along our major road corridors. This program is still in its development phases, and will focus on the exterior of the businesses and the property, in addition to some minor interior items on the inside as well. With the 2030 visioning plan serving as a guide, it is no coincidence that the city has been seeing new developments and redevelopments built with improved landscaping plans, outdoor amenities like bike racks and enhanced seating areas, in addition to quality building materials. This has been a push from our planning department in recent years. Before I get into some of our newer developments and the progress being made, I wanted to show some sample pictures of what we've been seeing and what has contributed to the need for this program. The common theme with these pictures is the lack of basic property maintenance. This is what we hope to change, and highlighted by this last picture showing a busy intersection with a business on the corner and an abandoned landscape area. Our recent developments have been elevated in comparison. A sample of some of these developments are demonstrated initially or first by Christian Financial Credit Union, headquarters located at 15 in Van Dyke, which includes a small apple orchard on site in addition to an employee walking path. We've seen service stations like the one shown here located at 16 in DeQuinder, where the landscaping was improved with the redevelopment of this old gas station, and new multifamily development along Dobry, which has added an abundance of landscaping along their berm, in addition to connections to the sidewalk path. When undergoing redevelopment or developing new, the review process will provide improved landscaping schemes and updated site amenities similar to those shown previously. It is great to see development and redevelopment occurring, contributing to improving the properties in the city. However, newer developments occasionally highlight the lacking landscaping or site maintenance to the businesses around them. Shown here is a new development with installed landscaping on their site adjacent to an existing property where the landscaping is lacking by comparison. It is difficult to expect our businesses to improve their properties if the city is not doing the same. Therefore, leading by example, the city has worked diligently to keep our properties well-maintained and aesthetically pleasing. The city has steadily invested into our properties and public spaces over the years, from medium projects like Van Dyke Avenue with enhanced landscaping and monuments added at the intersections, to Hall Road, where during the spring season the landscaping provides an infusion of color into a major road thoroughfare, and soon to be completed Mound Road, which will include enhanced landscaping and light features near the intersections. The bar has been set by the previous projects, and we expect this median to surpass both Van Dyke and Mound Road. In addition to green spaces, buildings and property improvements like the city campus renovations were recently completed, adding landscaping around the city buildings, reskinning the decades-old city buildings with the new brown and red siding, adding a state-of-the-art DPW building that was recently rebuilt, some minor but much-needed improvements like pavement repairs to our fire stations, to a revisioned Dodge Park and Community Center. The list could go on and on. The city has shown our willingness to improve and maintain our properties and buildings for the benefits it brings to those who live in the city and visit our buildings, for the staff that works in these buildings, and create a place where businesses would want to invest, where properties and green spaces are well maintained. We want our businesses to join us on this journey. Now, how do we get there? Enforcement of property maintenance is very proactive in Sterling Heights, and in general, most cases are residentially focused. With approximately 42,000 residential property, it requires a focused effort to monitor and achieve voluntary compliance. Non-residential properties do see a fair amount of violations, accounting for about 20% of all cases. These cases do take a bit longer to achieve compliance due to the amount of work and cost involved in correcting issues compared to residential, but are nonetheless just as important. Some of the common violations for commercial properties may include trash and debris cleanup, sidewalk snow removal, removal of abandoned vehicles, or pavement repairs. We have started contacting commercial businesses about a year ago regarding some exterior maintenance on their properties. Some of the items included what previously noted: parking lot repairs, landscaping installations, and facade improvements. We understand that improvements come with challenges such as finding funds, securing contractors. Therefore, we have worked with these businesses to provide improvement plans to allow the work to be completed across a couple seasons. The success has been limited, but we have achieved traction with some commercial centers working with us on improving their development. Some recent examples of improvement include site landscaping with ground plantings and flowers, parking lot repairs to dilapidated areas, and facade improvements. Here's a picture of the old facade of the commercial center at the southwest corner of 15 and Shaner. This commercial center owner has recently completed the renovation of the facade along 15 Mile Road and has indicated they will be following up this year with landscaping and parking lot improvements. It is often challenging to convince owners of commercial centers to invest and improve their properties. I believe in order to get buy-in from the property owners, relaying the positive benefits of improving their properties is key. This is in addition to working with the owners, allowing them time to improve their properties over a couple of seasons. A few of the many benefits of improving businesses are maintenance of the exterior and interior, which improves the aesthetic value, which can generate a positive response from customers, ensure your business stands out from the street. Keeping the tenant satisfied can lead to better tenant retention. In addition, when it comes time for a rate increase, they'll see the value behind a slightly higher price point. And customer loyalty. A high-quality appearance inside and out will show customers the company cares about what goes inside the business as much as they value the exterior, leaving the customer with a positive experience that can bring them back for repeat business. Brand new with this initiative, code officers will be inspecting the inside of the business, primarily in the general public access areas, looking for minor items that can be easily corrected, like ceiling tiles that are stained or walkways that are blocked. These are items that customers will see and may not lead to returning business, regardless of how great the product or service is. During the inspection, if violations are found, the owner will be mailed a notice of violations or issues to correct, and the manager on site will also be provided a list of the violations. The process for corrections will generally follow the current practice in place for all violations, and as always, we try to achieve voluntary compliance. Currently, we are achieving about 97% voluntary compliance across all code violations. We will be focusing on about 750 parcels, including businesses that would include mini markets and mini convenience stores, restaurants, fast food, strip malls, shopping centers, pharmacy, and retail stores. Shown here is the business corridor map which the code officer will use when scheduling and tracking inspections. We do not want to surprise our businesses with this program. Our intent is to work together for a beautiful Sterling Heights. Therefore, to roll out this program, we have enlisted the help of Hoyt & Creative to help with a marketing plan for this new program. We have worked with Hoyden on past marketing projects with great results. They are working on developing an initial letter to businesses, website, social media posts, postcard flyers, and a trifold handout. Here are some of the materials they are currently working on. Initially, we intend to notify businesses with letters in advance of our inspection. We are targeting late winter, early spring to allow businesses on their own to start evaluating their properties for areas that need improvement. This letter will include a QR code with a link to a website landing page, including a description of the plan, full list of items that we will be inspecting. A sample of that letter is shown on the screen. Shown here is a concept of the website landing page that will have the information describing the program, inspection lists, and benefits to the owners. A trifold flyer is being created that will be included with the initial letter that is mailed out to the property owners and can be also handed out to the property managers when on site. Spreading the message of this program with postcard mailers highlighting the benefits of improving your business. In addition to social media concepts that are being created that can be shared across our social channels to promote the message, and those who follow will be introduced to the program and its benefits. And in conclusion, we really feel that this program supports the city's 2030 visioning plan by keeping commercial centers successful, vibrant, and attractive, and keeping our green spaces aesthetically pleasing. This vision can be accomplished by collaborating with our commercial center partners for success as we work together for a beautiful Sterling Heights, achieving an even more high-quality families and business to elevate Sterling Heights. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
And Mayor, we're ready to address any questions that you or the city council or audience members may have on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. Thank you, Mr. Castor, for your presentation. At this time, I'll ask if any members of the audience want to comment on this agenda item. So the way we'll do it for any members of the public who are here is that for each agenda item, for each presentation, there'll be an opportunity for citizen comment, and then there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for citizen comment on any item not on today's agenda, but we have a pretty comprehensive agenda. So is there anyone who'd like to speak on this presentation? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, it's going.
So, sir, come up to the podium.
Sure. My name's Adam Hodgick, and listening to Mr. Van Sickle's presentation, very nice presentation, but I was just wondering, have you got any numbers as far as money in terms of which of these items are cost neutral and which might be required, funding, input from the citizens?
So, sir, we don't go back and forth.
Oh,
You can
okay.
make comments, and then when the city council.
So that's one of my comments. And the other one is, as far as Mr. Castor's presentation, I was just wondering, as far as citizenry, it would probably be very nice to have an area that the citizens can come to for advice from the city that says, okay, here, maybe I want to create a lawn that doesn't require mowing as often. How do I do this? I mean, even if it's calling up or saying that, listen, talk to the Michigan State, Extension Services. I think that would be very helpful. And in terms of the, well, I'll save that one for tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Nelson, excuse me. Come on up.
Ken Nelson, Fire Steel, Sterling Heights. I'd like to drop back a little bit into Mr. Vanderpool's presentation and talking about street trees. This has been a bug to me for quite a long time. Street trees being put in our right-of-ways are being planted right over our infrastructure, our drainage, our water. They're causing damage to sidewalks that up till now have been replaced by the residents. I think that you need to look at something that if a street tree that was planted over infrastructure and has damage, you ought to have something that makes the city responsible to replace the tree, replace the sidewalks. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the resident. The ways to pay for this also bothered me. Either a millage increase or a special assessment. That's force. I don't have any street trees. My trees were gone because of the emerald ash borer. Okay, I like it that way. I like my house visible from the road, and I don't want a street tree. You're going to come in and tell me I have to have one? I think you better rethink the street tree issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to the city council participation. Council, is there anyone who'd like to speak on this item? Any questions or comments for administration? Mrs. Zarko.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Mr. Castor. I just want to know about the inspections. Will they be done by section throughout the city? Some of these internal inspections, is that how it's going to be handled? Or is it throughout the entire city if there's some kind of concern?
Thank you, Mr. Zarko, for the question. Yeah, so the plan for the program is the map that was highlighted focuses on our major road corridors. So we will be systematically going throughout the city, picking areas within the sections of the city, but they will be focused on those major road corridors.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Council, anyone else? Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a brief question for the chair to Mr. Castor. Mr. Castor, I think I got this from your presentation, but I just wanted to verify. Part of your program will be checking site plan compliance, because as we've noticed in the last couple of years, several sites have gone wildly out of compliance with what they said that they were doing with their sites. And I think some of the things that I've already seen being put in, that you're double checking that if a tree is supposed to go in a parking lot, for example, it's there. If a curb is supposed to be there, it's there. Because I know that several times, both the planning commission and city council have discovered that what the site plan says and what the business is doing are two wildly different things.
Yes, you are correct, Councilman Ranke. Yeah, that will definitely be part of that inspection process is when we notice those sites that might be lacking in their landscape plan. We would be pulling those, including that as part of the inspection. And obviously, if we see a 1 or 2 tree missing from a site, we will make sure to get that on just a regular site inspection list as well.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke.
Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt.
Taylor, I'm sorry. Just a brief comment. The shopping center referenced in your presentation, the one at 15 in Shaner, I live very close by and pass it every day, multiple times. I will say that the upgrades to the facade is phenomenal. It has made a huge impact on that corner, and hopefully, I know there were some improvements years ago on the development across the street. I'd like to see more improvements there, but it really was a game changer for that site, and they're to be commended. That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, anyone else? Mr. Yanez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to Mr. Castor. Mr. Castor, how long is it going to take to inspect 750 parcels?
It'll be a process. You know, initially we're going to start and see how many we can get through in a year, a couple seasons. We have a dedicated staff right now, and if needed, we can obviously switch or change some of the focus of our existing code officers if it's not moving along quick enough. And so, but initially, we want to get out there with one single employee to just start focusing on these. We have additional backup already slated to help him out. And then we also have an additional 12 code officers that can step in and help if the burden is too much. So we, there is no targeted timeframe to get through all of them, but we will be moving through them. I want to say, this initial round, we're going to try and get, into that 20, 25, 30 range and see if we can get those inspections and get some of these improvements going. And then, methodically work through these because they do take a bit of time to.
So 25 to 30, over what time frame is that? Over a year period?
Yes.
So you don't have like a schedule every 3 years, everybody gets inspected, that you don't have anything set up like that yet?
Not yet, not
Okay.
currently, yep.
All right, thank you. And I'm also going to make a comment, and let me ask this first. And then in regards to our social media, our media plan, reaching out to the business owners, obviously we have a number of business owners in the city where English is second language, and maybe traditions aren't quite the same. And what are we doing to reach out to those folks to make sure that they're complying?
Yeah, so in terms of that, what we can look at doing is that initial letter that goes out, get it across multiple languages, with Chaldean being the more predominant. We can get that letter out and send it out to a lot of those businesses that we know are Chaldean of nature, or provide that dual-sided letter where one side it is English, back side's Chaldean. And then also we can put that translator link on the bottom where you can click on it, so that letter can be translated into any language of your choice.
And are we working with any of the chambers of commerce or business associations?
Currently, we have not reached out.
Okay. And the one comment I'm going to make is that I agree with Mrs. Schmidt. That's our Jets Pizza down there, and that building looks fantastic. But the problem isn't as much the front of the building as it is the rear of the buildings. That's where the real trash happens. And I see a lot of trash behind these strip malls. I see, in regards to recycling, I see a lot of high-quality cardboard that's not even broken down, that fills up dumpsters. And I think there really needs to be an education policy going on with a lot of these business owners. So that's something I think the city needs to consider. And I'll also make this comment directed to Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool, I really think we hold a lot of meetings like this. We have our clergy forum. I really think that having a commercial properties owners summit would be of great value, getting everybody in the room at the same time talking about the issues and then hearing feedback from commercial property owners. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Council, anyone else? Okay, so on that topic, Mr. Castor, we've exchanged emails over the past few weeks or months about what Mr. Yanez was talking about. We've known for a while that we have very low industrial vacancy in Sterling Heights, and so businesses that are trying to expand really don't have a whole lot of options. Unfortunately, sometimes the only option they have is to move out of Sterling Heights. I've been contacted by a number of business owners who have been using shipping containers as storage on their properties. I've been contacted by business owners who aren't using shipping containers, and one in that area that we were talking about where the facade improvements were made. Can you tell me what your thoughts are on using those shipping containers? I'll tell you, I took pictures. They're very clean. As long as they're maintained, you can see shipping containers that are full of graffiti and rusted out and not in good condition. But it appeared that these containers were very well maintained. They were secure. They had the ability to be locked, obviously. And in many instances, they looked like an element of the building or the property. Does the current ordinance allow for that? And if not, what do they need to do to be approved to use shipping containers as storage on their property? And if there is no process for them to be approved, well, I guess I'll keep it there so it's not too many compounded questions here.
Yeah, thanks. So it's the quick answer is, are they allowed to be there? Is no, they're not in commercial areas. That would be with like an asterisk. You could have them with a temporary use permit that limits you to 6 months in a year. It's a temporary thing to store stuff in there and then move it along once your time is up. That would be for commercial and industrial. Industrial areas would allow for outdoor storage, where your commercial centers would not have that same zoning allowance within it. So we did receive some feedback when we started to cite some of these shipping containers. Some of them do look much better than others. We've seen also some pretty rough ones. But due to the feedback that we've received, reached out to some of the property owners that received that, and we are looking at what we need to do, either to permit, change an ordinance, or provide a pathway for business owners that might need a little extra storage, but maybe not have the funds to completely renovate their building. You know, what would that look like? An ordinance amendment, a permit allowance of such in certain areas. Initially, we'd be probably looking at the industrial areas, as that's where we've seen a large number of these shipping containers show up, as opposed to the commercial centers.
Well, I was gonna, not to cut you off, but I was gonna ask, is there, have you seen any on commercial centers? Because I do know, like I said, at that 15 in Shaner, a couple years ago, was asked to look into some outdoor storage for a company that was expanding, didn't have anywhere else to go, didn't have anywhere else to put it, was going through a lot of inventory. Would shipping containers potentially be a solution for commercial areas? Because I guess I'd have to see them. Like in the industrial corridor and the industrial parks that we have in Sterling Heights, there's not a whole lot of residential traffic. I mean, there's just not a whole lot of through traffic, I should say. Folks just driving through the industrial parks to get from point A to point B doesn't really happen as much as in the commercial areas, obviously. So to me, I would be much less concerned about outdoor storage as long as it was safe, as long as it was secure, as long as it wasn't, you know, there weren't hazardous materials, a fire risk, et cetera. But do you think that there's a path forward for these businesses that are in commercial centers, need additional storage, need additional space? What can we do for them to keep them in the city and be as, you know, as friendly to them as we can without sacrificing aesthetics and without sacrificing the health and safety and welfare of the residents?
Yeah, we've seen not nearly as many in commercial areas. We have seen a few storage containers on commercial properties, but I think there is a way, what we're looking into, a way to provide them, kind of, as you mentioned, screened, something that looks aesthetically pleasing, that's not, you know, some kind of maintenance on it, so that they're routinely checked, maybe a pad of sorts so it doesn't damage the parking lot, because it might not always be there, and when they remove it, it could, you know, cause concern and headache for that, you know, center owner when they leave it. So these are all things that are on the table that we're discussing, you know, internally, as we want to bring something ultimately, you know, bring it up and see where that leads us. But it could be, you know, in terms of an ordinance amendment or a permit, because a lot of times they need it a lot longer than what the 6-month temporary use allows.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Castor. Anyone else, council, one last time? Okay, we will move on from that item then. Thank you again, Mr. Castor, for your presentation. And next up, we have the Master Plan Mixed Use Development and Review of PUD Ordinance. Mr. Vanderpool, would you like to kick that off?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And as Mr. Parcells getting ready, I just wanted to say, in conclusion of the last item, the whole idea behind the programs that you're hearing today is collaboration and partnering. You know, we have a good reputation in our business community, both commercial and manufacturing, of working with businesses, making sure that we are helping them and not hindering their growth. And it's one of the reasons why we have a very vibrant local economy and why businesses choose to stay and reinvest in the community. So as we move forward with the program you just heard and the upcoming program, the whole idea is to create an environment in the city that's conducive to business growth and sustainability. And with that in mind, transitioning into our discussion of our planned unit development ordinance is really good timing, because we have our master plan that's underway and other strategic plans, including this session, where the city's very good at developing plans, looking forward. We have our capital plans, we have our 5-year financial plan, we have our 5-year departmental plans, we have our strategic plan, we have our visioning 2030, soon to be 2040 plan. It's hard to remember what year we're in, but we have a really good track record of looking forward. And the PUD ordinance is really important to the city, because we only have a few remaining parcels that need to be developed. When I say a few, it could be 50, 60, but when you consider we have 40,000 parcels, we're mostly built out as a community. So the PUD ordinance provides us some flexibility in developing these remaining properties. At the same time, these properties can be a bit controversial. So we wanted to spend some time this morning, talk about the PUD ordinance, see if there's any direct ideas that City Council may have as we move forward. Otherwise, you'll see in our master plan we'll be doing some tweaking. So I'd like to introduce our Assistant City Development Director and our Assistant City Planner, Jake Parcell, who's going to lead this discussion along with our City Attorney.
All right. Good morning, Mayor Taylor, council members, city staff, and members of the public. I'm excited to be here at my first strategic planning meeting to discuss the master plan, mixed-use developments in Sterling Heights, and a review of the PUD ordinance. So just a brief overview. Mr. Koszubski will be discussing the PUD ordinance, the benefits of this ordinance, and really how we can use this development tool, as Mr. Vanderpool stated, in some of our parcels. A brief discussion about what this ordinance allows in terms of mixed-use developments and how they can benefit the city's nodes and corridors. Then a brief update on where we are with the master plan update and our intention of looking forward with the master land use plan. Mr. Koszubski.
Thank you, Jake. Good morning, Mayor and City Council. This morning I will be presenting on the city's plan unit development process and use. Under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, municipalities are permitted to establish planned unit development requirements in their zoning ordinances. These ordinances generally permit flexibility in the regulation of land development, encourage innovation in land use and variety in design, layout, and type of structures. That they achieve economy and efficiency in the use of land, natural resources, energy, and the provision of public services and utilities. It also encourages the useful use of open space and better provide housing, employment, and shopping opportunities, particularly suited to the needs of the residents in the area. PUD ordinances are an important and multifaceted tool in most communities as a way to attract and increase desirable development in their community. The city added its PUD ordinance in 2005 with the last amendment in 2009. The intent of the city's code is to encourage innovation and allow more efficient use of land through the use of regulatory flexibility. PUD is also known as contract zoning, which allows the project to be mutually agreeable between the developer and the city and provides the city with assurances that the development will be of the type and quality agreed upon. Importantly, City Council is granted authority to increase, decrease, waive, or otherwise modify the current standards within the zoning ordinance to result in a higher level of public benefit for the project. A PUD is permitted in all zoning districts and must be developed in accordance with a comprehensive physical development plan that establishes a functional use of the areas, the density patterns, and the vehicular and pedestrian circulation systems. The PUD must match the physical character of the city and the surrounding areas and must preserve as much natural vegetation and terrain as possible. Importantly, for our PUD, the PUD ordinance allows both residential and or mixed-use developments. So why use a PUD? Go back one, Jake. Thank you. Why use a PUD? A PUD is useful for helping with regulatory flexibility in developing lots that are difficult to develop due to their size, terrain, natural vegetation, or density requirements. When considering the PUD, City Council has the ability to decrease, waive, or modify the use, density, intensity, setbacks, building heights, parking, design standards, and landscape standards. In reviewing and approving a PUD, the Planning Commission and City Council members weigh several factors, including whether the project provides adequate walkways, recreational areas, parking areas, open spaces, areas to be used by the public, whether the project will provide efficient, aesthetic, and desirable use of open areas. Questions like, does the development match the physical character and provide a complementary variety of housing types, mixed uses, or residential uses that are in harmony with the area that is surrounding the development? Does the proposed mixed use create commercial nodes, gateways, or facilitate renovation of existing centers? Are the commercial uses suitable for the site and comparable with surrounding areas? Does the project include adequate landscaping, walkway linkages, controlled vehicle access, or other
accessibility. So what parcels benefit from a PUD? Well, mixed-use developments, generally when you're developing along nodes and corridors that have more intensive uses where the properties can work together for a common goal or node. Single-family or site condominiums will also benefit because PUDs provide relief from green spaces and requirements and setbacks and lot widths to create unique housing opportunities. Adjacent parcels are also impacted because PUDs provide flexibility and innovation and can provide a cumulative mixed-use effect in an otherwise stagnant corridor. So an example of PUD benefits are shown on this slide, where you see on the left a conventional subdivision, which is laid out and pretty standard in what we've seen over the years. Whereas on the right side, when you have a difficult area where they may have wetlands, or you may want to preserve some forestry and walkability, you can lay out your development in a more useful manner to allow for the aesthetics and pedestrian walkability. So what are some examples of planned unit developments that have been successful or that have been developed under our PUD ordinance? Well, the flexibility of the PUD ordinance has resulted in a number of these projects, including Sterling Enterprise Park from a commercial point of view, the Chaldean Community Foundation Van Dyke Apartments, which is a true mixed-use development, as well as various housing projects like the Reserves, Palm Ryan, Linda Lane, Legacy Heights, Sterling Retail, the upcoming verandas in the most recent years, and the lakeside redevelopment will be accomplished through the PUD process. So how can we enhance our PUD ordinance? Well, the city can qualify sites as part of their master planning that designate and target the areas where PUDs might be preferred. They could add additional eligibility requirements, stricter and defined standards. The first goal would be to have all administration, council, planning commission, zoning board, they have a clear understanding of the city's master use plan, because it is all important to meet this objective that everybody understand what the goals are for the PUD ordinance. Some communities require housing projects to preserve a portion of the site for low to moderate income to provide more affordable housing, while Planning Commission and City Council look at general standards to make sure that the project is in harmony. Adding more specificity to the standards may also further ensure that the request provides the best project and the most public benefit. Because Sterling Heights is largely built out, the PUD process has become more prevalent to address the odd or awkward lots left to be developed. The process provides the city with the most input and control into what projects will be developed in these areas, and is the preferred method to guarantee quality developments. While enhancements can be made, a proper balance must be considered so as not to create too many hurdles that it serves to discourage instead of encourage innovation and future development. With that, I will turn it over back to Jake Parcell, our City Development Manager and Assistant City Planner, to discuss how the process is applied with mixed-use developments in conjunction with the master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Koszybski. So as mentioned in the first part of this presentation, Council has the ability to recommend approval of mixed-use developments under the PUD ordinance. There's two different types of mixed-use developments that we can consider when we move forward on putting this ordinance in action. First being a traditional vertical mixed use, as you'll see on the left there. Two or more different land uses, generally office or commercial, with residential on the ground floor or on the upper floors. And then a horizontal mixed use, similar to the one that we reviewed at the January meeting on one of our mixed use nodes, which is multiple uses within an area that create one singular cohesive development. So there's a lot of options for how we can kind of build out these mixed use areas within the city. The city currently recommends mixed use areas in 13 different locations as designated by our 2017 Master Land Use Plan. In the zoning ordinance, these are found in the Van Dyke Mixed Use Overlay District and the traditional mixed use development node overlay district. Both of the intents of these sections are to place an emphasis on density, pedestrian orientation, and flexibility in design and use, all things that the PUD ordinance accommodates in great detail. Mixed use can provide a great deal of benefits for the city of Sterling Heights. Our 2017 existing master land use plan calls for development that is successful, vibrant commercial centers that include bountiful recreation and pedestrian-oriented amenities, and for the redevelopment of our corridors. So when we work with developers to come in and look at these focus areas on our parcels that need to be redeveloped, it's important to know that our PUD ordinance is in our toolbox to use that can kind of promote the best type of development on these sites to achieve all of these benefits that our plans are currently calling for. PUD ordinance also is very beneficial for assisting with housing. As Mr. Vanderpool stated, you have a housing study in your informational packets today. And when you look at the type of housing that really constitutes affordable housing, you want different variety of housing types. The PUD ordinance can help accomplish this. It can help find different types of missing middle or mixed-use developments in the city that contribute to a wide variety of housing in terms of price and size. And also helps kind of enrich our nodes and helps the city with our initiative to achieve our redevelopment ready certification with MEDC by providing different types of housing within our ordinances. Finally, to tie this all together, we'd like to give you just a brief update on where we are and where we plan on moving forward with the master land use plan. Every 5 years by state statute, the city is required to review the master land use plan. So the Planning Commission has to start this and include it in their meeting minutes. We did this at the December meeting. So 2022 was our year to begin the review of the plan. Our staff did an excellent job before I started here to really break down the plan into sections, provide it for comment with the Planning Commission, and begin to look at different areas where the plan could be potentially amended or adopted based on changes in the community in the last 5 years. Specific comments from the Planning Commission really include a baseline review of looking at the demographic information and the type of resource information and service providers, which is generally recommended every 5 years, but also looking forward to some of our long-term goals that the city wants to include in the master plan update moving forward. First and foremost, land use should be something they recommended should be reevaluated. We heard at the SEMCOG long-range visioning forecast session that the region's anticipated to grow. So it's important to look at our housing stock, look at how office is used in light of different changes from working from home, and then create activities that create a sense of place and evaluate how our current master land use plan does this. So providing recognition for our wonderful neighborhoods in terms of branding, in terms of looking at our nodes and our corridors, and how the city can really place itself with quality development along those areas. And then also to make sure that our zoning ordinance is in line with what our current master plan and any updates to the master plan kind of include, which is very important because in the last 2 years, the city has updated these 2 incredible sub-area plans. So it's important to go through the zoning ordinance for our Van Dyke overlay district and make sure that the intention of this ordinance lines up with the newly adopted master plan for the Van Dyke Avenue. And then also with our award-winning sustainability plan from 2022, making sure that the city's landscaping ordinances, tree planting ordinances, and things like that are in line with what the sustainability plan recommends. That way we have this type of cohesion with all of our plans that from a regulatory perspective is reflected as well. That helps aid development. Oh, sorry. So in all, there's a lot of benefits with updating the master land use plan, but none are really more important than this creates an opportunity for us to look forward for the goals for the city for the next 5 years, where we want to go with our development along our main corridors and our nodes, and also where we want to move forward with some long-term development in the city using tools like our PUD ordinance and mixed-use developments. It also is an incredible participatory process, the planning process for creating a master plan. So it has a long range of citizen involvement and other involvement from other local communities, regional planning authorities, and boards and commissions and members of council. The timeline for this can vary. I put up a side there from a different community that it stretches several years, so I'm hoping it wouldn't be that long. But it shows you really how much public involvement there is through interviews and meeting with people and really creating a cohesive long-range plan for the city's goals for the foreseeable future. And after all of this, hopefully we can create some quality development through our master plan update. In summary, the master plan is here to help us imagine the future of Sterling Heights and the goals we want to accomplish moving forward. Provides us a wonderful visioning opportunity to pull together our recently adopted sub-area plans into our master land use plan to create one cohesive document that goes in line with the soon-to-be 2040 visioning plan. And then also helps us reevaluate our development tools, make sure that we're offering them to developers as options for our parcels that need to be built out, and help create developments that are vibrant, transformational, with a nod to our lakeside conceptual development there, and most importantly, beneficial for our community. With that, I'll open for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Purcell. So once again, I'll turn to the audience for any comments or questions on this item. Mr. Nelson.
PUD, planned unit development. No, in Sterling Heights, it's planned urban development. I'm going to combine what we're doing with your mixed-use nodes. I'm just going to throw one thing out at the very beginning. Let's say that I have a two-car garage in my single-family neighborhood, and I decide that I think it'd be a good idea to provide a storefront out of my two-car garage to serve my neighborhood. Would that be possible? Could you put in for that? That's a mixed use in a single-family network. The master plan needs to be redone. We are referring every time, and we've had several examples this past year of redevelopment and the use of the PUD process and the use of the Vision 2030. Been referred to several times. We've had a lot of mistakes. We have a very, you're right, Mr. Vanderpool, it's a very controversial issue. We had the 10 acres on Hall Road in Sterrett that was cram zoned twice, and the people showed up and said, you're trying to put all of this directly abutting a single-family neighborhood. And the city really wanted that to develop. I am really surprised. So cram development instead of PUD ordinance. The PUD ordinance, the other thing that is really bad is I know it's in the Zoning Enabling Act, but it gives 7 people out of this city that we elected complete responsibility over to change our zoning regulations. So somebody comes in, the developers in the past year have come in under the PUD and have maximized what they do. They've maximized their variances. There's been different decisions by the Planning Commission, but it doesn't matter what the Planning Commission does, and that's a long process. It comes to the City Council, and you can change any of that. Heights, density, so on and so forth. That process needs to change, whether it's in the Zoning Enabling Act or not. It has to change. 7 people are sitting there putting an island like the one on Shaner and Hall Road. There's this 3-story brick building, the Great Wall of Shaner, that was put up. Doesn't belong there. We've had the complaints. So spot zoning is the other thing. I called what you're doing with the PUDs spot zoning. If we don't have enough to develop them like the zoning that we have around us. So the PUD needs some work. It's very restrictive. It's in the Zoning Enabling Act, but you have the right to change so that we don't have 7 people determining when we're going to put up a 4 or 5-story building. You have the right. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm not that versed in this as Mr. Nelson is, but one of the things that I've seen here is that this PUD ordinance, and that is, we're talking about identity being very, very critical, and one of the top things that we have to look at. We've got, the the Golden Ring there on M59 and some of the inefficiencies that have occurred in the last 10 years with that area there. And then we've got this PUD ordinance. I'm not hearing anything about teaching the residents about what should be done and what shouldn't be done, what's right and what isn't. I know that we're not supposed to have any debate, but, Mayor, you did have some debate relative to, these ordinance and on containers and that. And I'm just wondering, when we talk about the future of Sterling Heights and sustainability in terms of what our president is talking about, and that's energy efficiency. What are we doing to teach our community on installing solar cells? And is that something that, that we're looking forward to, or isn't it? Because, just like containers, they could be an eyesore. So what are we doing in that area? And I'm wondering whether or not we, something like maybe a business ombudsman, that could have a voice for the businesses that you're talking about wouldn't be a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I just wondered, as part of your strategic planning, you have an updated capital needs and prioritized capital needs plan.
We do. Every budget, we update the capital needs, and we have a capital improvement program, and there's a very detailed process that the city administration and every department goes through. Pretty much every department will send $10 million worth of needs, and they'll say, we got 500,000 for you. So those are debated pretty endlessly, from what I've heard, within departments, and that will be part of our budget process every year in April and May.
I was just kind of hoping to see something about that today.
Well, stay tuned.
Yeah, stick around.
Anyone else on this item? If not, okay, council, I will open it up to the city council for any questions or comments. Who'd like to go first? Mr. Yanis.
Mr. Fair, I just have a comment in regards to the PUDs. And this is something I've said before, and I'm going to emphasize it now at this meeting, that city council and the planning commission are not on the same page when it comes to PUDs. And frankly, I'm a little embarrassed by that planning commission will pass it and we'll deny it, planning commission will deny it and we'll pass it. It's the same project, and we're not on the same page. And city administration really needs to get us on the same page, whatever it takes, whether we have to have a meeting with planning commission or whatever. We need to be on the same page with planning commission when it comes to PUDs. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanis. Anyone else? Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some brief comments about the master plan. Since we're delving into it, and I'm all for a complete rewrite of the master plan, as well as the zoning ordinance, because there are a lot of, the zoning map has not been fully done since 1989, when I was 4 years old. So there's a whole idea there that there are things in the zoning map that don't make any sense, including that we have areas zoned for parking. Like that's a thing that people go out and buy. Like we need to zone some area for parking. But we really do need some real adjustments to both the master plan, the zoning map, and our codes. For example, projects come before us frequently asking for us to waive the requirement to have so much RV space in an RM2 or RM3 project. We almost always grant that variance because no one parks RVs in RM2 or RM3 buildings. We should strike that from our code because it's basically worthless. We also ask for a lot of green space as part of our process, and I think that's important, but I think the green space we ask for is out of whack with what prices are for property and how much we can expect. Our ordinance also doesn't classify balconies or rooftop amenities or anything like that as part of recreational space for residents. where as we know, these amenities, including pools and other things like that, are what draw residents to these buildings. We should rewrite our ordinance to count them as a recreation space so that developers have more ability to meet it without having to just set aside green space. I'm hopeful that, or I know that our a top-over review of parking requirements is coming to us on the city council. We have too much parking in this city. You know, Strongtown says that you should have about 80% filled parking lots. That means people have a place to park while also not just using useless parking lot space. Every spot in a parking lot in Sterling Heights that's not filled is like, I think they said it was over almost several $1,000s worth of land that is just reserved for asphalt and stripes. And that's crazy, that we are essentially taxing developers for space that's never used, and we're requiring it of them. You know, I was reading the report in our earlier packet, and it said that over half of all rented properties in Sterling Heights are single-person occupancy, even if it's a two-bedroom condo. But yet we require almost 3 parking spaces for this one-person, two-bedroom occupancy due to our ordinance requirements. That makes no sense. We are essentially requiring 3 parking spaces by ordinance for an occupancy that we know over half of are single. So we could cut that in half to 1.5 spaces and use more arable land for things that make sense. And looking at the zoning map that you had up there earlier, I know that the council has kind of looked at 3 different areas as what we should add to our mixed-use nodes. So I'll give them to you right now so you can write them down. 14 Mile and Shaner, from Moravian to Shaner. And then it was around Lakeside, including the Shaner and Hall area. And then Dodge Park and Plumbrook. And more than that, more than just adding these to our nodes, I think we need to put both teeth and some thought into our mixed-use ordinance. Right now, it doesn't require anything really besides some hopes and dreams to get mixed use. What we've seen in other communities is when you kind of tell developers what you want, they will try to fulfill it. I was reading the 9 Mile, East Point 9 Mile master planning document. I think they made some real good cases for zoning code changes that we should add into our master plan for the nodes. One, if a building is being redeveloped, its entrance should face the street and it should be brought to the street. If they want to use the building as is, that's fine. But if they want to knock it down and reuse the parcel, they should have to bring it to the street. And East Point's going to require all buildings on 9 Mile now to be 2 stories or better. That's a requirement. And they have to have X number of windows and X number of doors. Any kind of parking needs to be side or rear, but there needs to be what they call a knee wall between pedestrians in front and parking in the back. That kind of screens the parking too, rather than just have big open parking lots. These are not like groundbreaking things, but creating a kind of a facade idea for what developers should do would help create that wall of buildings that we're hoping for in the mixed use, so that developers aren't kind of on their own trying to figure out how to fit it in. You know, with the plan in East Point, which I think is well done and really brings a lot of stuff that can be done in any corridor that's being turned to mixed use, is it essentially states that it should be a wall of buildings that should all have a similar but different feature. It should limit curb cuts to certain access areas, entrance from side streets, try to create an area where people can walk and do things without constantly having traffic cross their path. Because that's one of the biggest problems that we see in these mixed-use areas, is it's hard to cross them because you could get run over. And then on top of that, we should ban drive-throughs and drive-through type businesses in the mixed-use nodes. They aren't pedestrian friendly. They create kind of conflict points that are dangerous. And frankly, if we want to create a mixed-use area, cars should be the afterthought in the nodes, not in the city in general, but in the nodes. Trying to think what else. Well, we also should really look at combining and collapsing our zoning districts. We have C1, C2, C3. We have R60, R80, R120, R whatever, all for single-family housing. And if we really are trying to maximize the space in which people can build on, it doesn't make much sense what kind of home they put up on it. If R60, R80, R120, they don't really, we should have one R zone that can then be used for housing. Come to us with a plan that makes sense for the area. I think our current zoning and master plan are overly restrictive. And that's creating developers to walk past us when we can say, we'll work with you to create something that's very nice and great. More than that, after watching a lot of planning and zoning meetings, one thing I would recommend that we change in our code is we should set some times for businesses that are actual business times that make sense. A business should be allowed to be open in the city from 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. without having to come before the planning commission and spend money and time to change their hours. If they want to be a late night business, bring them before the planning commission. If they want to go after 11, say, or 10 into midnight, they should, have to justify why they want to be open that late. But right now, I see businesses coming before the planning commission because they want to change their hours from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's insane. It's a waste of our planning commission's time. It's a waste of businesses' time. That should be done administratively, because as a city, we know when most businesses are normally open. We don't need to have a special meeting to talk about it. I'm going to stop for now, but I might have some more thoughts. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else on council? Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So yes, I just,
Microphone,
sorry.
so they can hear you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Taylor. So yes, I do, actually, I am going to echo some of, very briefly, Mr. Radke's views. He had a lot, and I'm just going to echo that. I appreciate Mr. Parcel's overview of the PUD and the master plan mixed use. I do like that you did a very nice job, Mr. Parcel, for your first shot and your first visit with us, so I appreciate that. PUD ordinance is pretty unwieldy at times, and I would like to see us go after it a little bit more thoroughly and have it revamped. Some I do not like that we have to, for many times when we have PUD options come before us, that we have to grant quite a few variances. I would like to see that those variances are not often, that we have a review of it so that we don't have to always grant variances within our PUD ordinance. That's what I would like to echo with Mr. Radke. I do think that we need to review our ordinances so that we have to not always grant variances in order to approve a PUD. So that's what I'm echoing there. And then in that instance, I do think that we also need to collapse again some of our residential and our commercial zonings. So that's all I would like to say on that. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sarowski. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think our summary statement here in regard to the master land use plan tells it all, because your master land use plan dictates what your city is going to look like in the future. What are you trying to accomplish? And I've always thought that we're working for the benefit of our community. When you purchase a home, that is your biggest investment. A lot of people want that to stay residential. This is where you go after work and you can relax, and this is your home. You have your industrial area, you have your commercial area. Yes, we're into the mixed use, but in my opinion, when we do the master land use plan, we should have areas that are designated that this is where we want the mixed use developed. As an example, the Van Dyke corridor. In regard to the PUD, I still would like to see some guidelines there. Maximum, how many stories? I don't want a 10-story building, especially near a residential development. 2-story, 3-story, acceptable, but we'll have the areas where that is where we want them to go. The density, what are we talking about? How much are we going to cram into a small area? You've got 2 acres of land. How dense do you want that to be? So what I'm trying to say is I want to see some guidelines in a PUD development. What can we change? What's our maximum? What's our minimum? And having that guideline, then know where we want to put these. I would like to see a lot of review done creating this new master land use plan. I would like to see a lot of involvement. Our 2 boards, our zoning board and our planning and council involvement to make sure that we do this right. Because as you said in your summary, benefit for our community. And what we're doing, I'm repeating, we're creating the future of Sterling Heights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Koski. Anyone else, council?
Mayor Taylor?
Sorry, Mrs. Zarko.
Thank you. First of all, welcome, Mr. Parcell. And thank you for your great report. You know, it was actually very informative. But here are some of my questions through the chair to Mr. Parcell. I think it goes without saying that our zoning ordinance does need to be redone. I'm going to say that. And I'm grateful that even though it sits antiquated, that it doesn't hinder us from economic development and planning, that we do have other options. So explain to me, like the chicken and the egg, which comes first, the master plan update and then the changes to the zoning ordinance, or the other way around?
So thank you for your question. It's a great procedural question. The master planning update would be the most prioritized update we'd need to make. So as we do our review every 5 years, the way that I would envision it is looking at all these sub-area plans that I mentioned and looping them in, kind of creating a cohesive guidebook, a schematic for where you want to go, and then looking at the regulatory ordinance and the zoning ordinance from there, and then kind of creating, as Councilmember Koski mentioned, minimums, maximums, bulk area guidelines, restrictions, locations where you want this development, and then having the land use intention of the zoning ordinance reflect that. So after you get the land use plan done, you get all the public feedback and engagement, and then that can help target the regulatory part of it.
And the regulatory part of it, some of it comes from the state as well as what we would plan?
So some of it we're enabled to do by the state, but we would be able to do all of the zoning ordinance rewrites for the intention of our community to match our master land use plan.
Okay.
And then, yeah, ideally they'd work hand in hand together.
Okay. I'd like also when we're talking about some of these mixed-use developments and having all of the parking behind it, I'd like to do some research, because I know I've shopped on Mack Avenue and St. Clair Shores, and you know, good part of the time I've lived in Michigan, but there's a disadvantage of having all the parking in the back and only the entrances from the front, which means there's a strip mall that you have to walk all the way around in order to enter the business that you want to go into. So I'd like to do a little bit of research on that and actually maybe visit some of those businesses to find out if it's an advantage or a disadvantage. The other thing is it was something about inefficiencies for the corridor of our Golden Corridor. And I'm going to have to respectfully disagree, because the part that was mentioned is actually some of the businesses are actually first time in the country, or I shouldn't say first time in the state, first time in the county that have entered that area and are the #1 producing stores in their chain. So I guess I don't see inefficiencies when you have that kind of track record. So I just want to correct that. And I guess, and the other thing is that I noticed in one of the mixed-use developments that we have circled on our map is actually where the improvement was done to the shopping center that we've been referencing today at 15 and Shaner. Now, I guess my question would be, did we approach the owner of that shopping center to make the improvements, or did they come to us saying, this is what we like to do? So whoever can answer that question.
Thank you, Ms. Yarko. Yeah, so it's been a long process working with that owner of that commercial center. through the years, starting with landscaping, which is coming up in the near future, and then it transitioned a bit into the facade of the development as he was looking to do the landscaping, bringing it up. Wouldn't it be really nice if with your landscaping, we got a nice new facade, some parking lot? So it was a collaborative effort with that owner of the commercial center to, you know, really entice and enhance that area.
Did we give them incentives to do it?
Nope, this was all on their own. Well, I mean, the incentive is obviously a community partnership where, you know, benefits, you know, them and us.
That center's within walking distance, and I've watched it for 45 years. At one time, there was a sinking problem behind the shopping center where they were, you know, things were falling in. So it looks great. I have to agree with Mr. Yanas and Mrs. Schmidt. It's really nice, and would be nice if the shopping center across the street from it would have some new improvements as well. And then if you can explain to me, a city that's as developed as we are, what are some of the challenges going to be as far as updating this master plan?
Yeah, definitely. I think this really lends into a review of best practices for development, not only in the state, but in the nation, when you look at some of these large-scale redevelopments of areas that need it. So we have a lot of large developments along our corridors, so it's reimagining the land use, maybe pulling together different business owners and seeing if they want to work for one more comprehensive development rather than several developments on one corner. So it really kind of lends itself to the public participation part of the master planning. So getting in and talking with the business owners, seeing what deficiencies or problems they've had, and then helping create more recommendations through the planning process to target the redevelopment in here based on other best practices we see. So something like Lakeside is an example of this entirely comprehensive redevelopment of one large site through the PUD process, and then kind of seeing how the PUD has been applied before and helping tailor the ordinance to work to make it more friendly for redevelopment on areas that have been redeveloped. So it's really a ground up approach that we need to put a lot of legwork into, but something that is gonna be really beneficial to get this public comment from, particularly from business owners, and then what the public wants to see, and merging that together into our plan and ordinances to make it friendly for redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Zarko.
Mayor
Mrs.
Taylor, thank you. Just briefly, you know, I've been listening and a few comments have been made. I think what we need to be very careful about when we do this is to remember where we came from. There was an awful lot of people that purchased their homes as a bedroom community. And this big push for high density on small parcels that are adjacent to single-family homes, I think we really need to reevaluate that, and we need to ask community input. Sure, they come out when there is an agenda and they're within 300 feet of that development, but we really need to respect where we came from as well. I get we need to do some, you know, progressive moves in developing parcels in our city, but we just need to be very careful where we do that and who we're affecting by doing that. And as far as the Planning Commission and Council being on the same page, I agree with you, Mr. Yanas. However, the Planning Commission is a recommending body to the City Council, so sometimes that happens. It's up to administration to give recommendations, and then that's why we have all differences of opinion. And that's where you kind of hash it out at the table. So other than that, that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. I appreciate the comments and the discussion from the council here in the presentation. I think if we look back on 2022, 10 years from now, we're going to say unquestionably it was one of the most development-heavy or planning-heavy years in our city's entire past. I mean, I can't speak for the whole past of our city, and maybe there was a lot more at the beginning, but man, there was really a lot. I mean, we had so many of the apartment developments. We talked a lot about the North Van Dyke master plan. kicking off the Chaldean Community Foundation, making progress there, Lakeside Mall. And so it was really a year where this was front and center a lot. And that's not even to mention the Wedge project, which took up a long portion of the year back and forth with the developer and with residents. So resident participation and comment. So I think that this is very timely. And I think that the discussion is very much needed. You know, as Mrs. Schmidt said, you know, we have to balance a community that a lot of the residents who live here have lived here for decades. Many are new, but many of our residents are decades-old residents, and the nature of the community, I can understand, is changing. When we're getting close to being fully developed, you know, there's not the same amount of residential space where developers can come in and build single-family neighborhoods. That's sort of changing anyways, from what I can tell. You know, I don't remember any single-family residential housing developments since I've been on the city council, and that's been since 2009, where you have a price point for the single-family homes somewhere in the $150,000 to $200,000 range. All of the residential development that we've had in the recent past is looking at the higher end of what residents could possibly afford in Sterling Heights. So there just isn't that lower and mid-market development, it seems, happening. And there's obviously a great need for it. So what is the business community doing? They are responding by buying up commercial properties or buying up residential properties that might not be zoned properly, and then coming to the city and presenting a case for why this development should happen. So while I certainly appreciate what Mrs. Schmidt is saying, I think that we need to find a balance. And maybe the balance is closer to what the long-term residents here need. Maybe the balance is closer towards what the market needs and what the needs of you know, the growing population in Sterling Heights and growing population in Macomb County, the housing issue, the housing crisis. There has to be a proper balance there. So I don't necessarily have a solution. I think everybody who watches the city council meetings, particularly who has watched over the course of 2022, would know where I fall on that spectrum. But it certainly is something that I think we address by looking at the master plan, making the changes to the master plan that we need to, looking, as Mr. Radke has said over and over, going into our zoning ordinance and making the changes to the zoning ordinance so that that we all maybe could agree on, so that when it comes to a PUD, they're not asking for as much, they're not asking for as many variances, because to the public, I mean, I understand that. And I've made the comment before that, you know, this zoning ordinance is set by city council. It was set by a prior city council. It can be set by a new city council. So I personally don't see a whole lot of problems with this city council looking at a PUD and granting a lot of variances. That's the point of the ordinance, is that we have the flexibility to be able to determine whether this project in this area on these conditions is appropriate. But maybe it would be better if we just address those zoning changes. And I think that would be an important process for us to go through. So while I agree that we can't completely change the nature of the city of Sterling Heights, nor do I think we want to, how do we balance the need for a changing future with the needs of the residents who are comfortable and happy with the way things have always been done? Well, that's our job, and I think we'll figure out a way to do it. And I'm encouraged with the team that we have, and I thank you for the presentation today. So, Council, we are way ahead of time. If anybody has any further comments on this item, I'll allow a second round. Mr. Radke,
Please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think your comments are very well put. You know, we have to, as a city council, we are required to balance all the residents' needs. Now, my family has lived in Sterling Heights, myself, 25 years. My grandparents moved here in 1968. So we've been here a long time. But if a resident's been here for 5 years, we represent them the same. Longer-term residents don't have any more right here than short-term residents. They don't. Because they are our voters and our taxpayers and our residents. And if we treat new residents different than long-term residents, we are actually discriminating against them. But more than that, I want to talk about just demographic reality. We, at our strategic planning meeting last year, kind of reviewed the census and reviewed the rules, and essentially, our community is aging rapidly. When I was elected to council, the average age in Sterling Heights was 37. It's now 42. It has not decreased at all. It has increased every year I've been on council. And because of Proposal A and the Headley Amendment, we are soon going to become more like Warren, where we are kind of constricted in how much money we can raise our normal tax basis. So Warren taxes more and raises less because their residents are long-term and their assessments are so much lower because they've lived in their houses for 50 years. Essentially, they overtax to try to raise a similar amount. And that's going to happen to Sterling Heights unless something changes. It's just, that's reality. Some things that were talked about in this packet that I wanted to bring up was, one, mixed income development rules, which I think are one way to try to stop. Often when residents come and complain about a development, there's always this fear that it's going to be affordable housing or low-income housing or development housing. If we require residents, or we require developers to add mixed incomes into their developments, we can kind of spread these out across all developments. We won't just have rich people developments and, for lack of a better term, poor folk developments. We'll have developments that kind of reflect the economic reality of our community. I think something we really should think about in our PUD ordinance. I know that some cities give a bonus or some kind of added thing for these rules, but I'm wondering if we can just write them in, especially with Lakeside coming. Because I think that making sure that people of all income brackets can live in all of our neighborhoods is essential to really creating a Sterling Heights for everyone. More than that, I think that Ms. Zarko talked earlier this year about pattern book homes and how this missing middle development could really add to our neighborhoods without changing their look or their feel. And I agree with that. I think that we don't want to go too far, especially in our single-family home areas, but I think that allowing pattern book homes or duplexes that look like single-family homes or other ways could be one more way to stretch out our land to afford people more places to live. Because that's the reality is, people want to live in Sterling Heights. We don't have enough housing units to contain the people that want to live in Sterling Heights. That's why we've had so many apartments come before us this last year. People are literally scratching and clawing to live in our city because of all the amenities and all the great things that we do here. And we don't have enough units to put them here. So we need to do more on our end to make sure people have housing units at different income strata so that they can live and gain from, living in Sterling Heights. To that effect, I also think we really need to reapproach and think about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in our single-family zoning districts. And these could require that the homeowner lives on site so that it's not, you can't just turn it into a bunch of rentals or anything like that, but give people the ability to use their land and their space the way that they want to. I know that I've had several residents reach out because their parents are now aging and they want to age in place. They want to age here in Sterling Heights. But without a mother-in-law suite or an ADU, they're not sure how they can live here. And more than that, we should talk about tiny homes. We right now don't really have any requirements in Sterling Heights about tiny homes. We have mobile homes, but a tiny home is a mobile home, but it's not. It's a little bit different. And then we really talk about what tiny homes are. And then I think we also need to talk about garages. I saw a report from, I think it was SEMCOG, that said that less than 50% of people now park their car in their garage. That most people don't use their garage, use it as bonus space or a closet or a weight room, or in my dad's case, a workroom for wood carving and all kinds of other stuff. And if people aren't using their garages to hold vehicles, why are we making developers build garages? It doesn't make sense. Let people use their space the way they want. If they would rather have a bonus room in their house than a garage, we should let them. Because right now, we're requiring them to build this feature on their homes and less than 50% used for its stated purpose. And that's inefficient. We're charging people essentially thousands of dollars for space they don't want. And we've written into our code that this is what's required. And if people don't want to use it that way, why are we forcing people against their will to do something that is just frankly silly? I treasure every single person who lives in Sterling Heights. I think about all of them. Again, I've been here more than 2 decades. Some people have been here a lot longer than me, some people have been a lot here shorter than me, but they all want to live in a community that's welcoming, that is available to them, and that they can hopefully live here a long time for, and we need to make sure that we are giving them places to live and things to do to fulfill their needs. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Zarko.
Mayor Taylor, yeah, well, as long as you're giving us a second chance. Okay, I agree with some of the things that Mr. Radke said, but when you're talking about an area that is going to be affordable for a wide range of people, you're talking about almost a lifestyle, and they do that in a lot of senior developments. And I think one of the places that if we look at are the verandas, which will have there's going to be attached, supposedly from the concept, attached condos, detached condos, maybe snowbird living where it's going to be like an apartment style living. So there's going to be a lot there. I mean, I remember when they said they had the presentation, they're also going to have a assisted living facility that's going to be right on site. So that as people age, they don't have to move from where they've been living. So I can appreciate all of that. And I realize that we have a housing shortage and that we're trying to maximize some of the space that we have. But as a council member, it is not my responsibility to grant a developer, it would be a revenue source that's going to be carried on for generations. And I understand that they need to maximize their cost as far as getting it back, but it doesn't mean that everything has to be to the max. And those are things that I want to watch in the future, because it's not my responsibility sitting here to make sure that they have a revenue source for the grandchildren. And that's what some of this is. So, nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Zarko, and council on round 2, anybody? Mrs. Schmidt.
Mayor Taylor, just for the record, I never would imply nor mean that one resident should have more rights over or say over another. I just think that the people that are here should have a say regarding things that aren't here yet. And that was my point, not that any resident should have any more say over another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Schmidt. Anyone else? If not, okay. Thank you again, Mr. Castor, Mr. Parcell. So it is 10:17 right now. We are scheduled to have this item go until about 11 and then take a break. I think what we'll do is we'll take about a 20-minute break. We'll be back at 10:40. Is that all right, Chief? You're presenting next. And then we'll just be about 30 or so minutes ahead of schedule, and maybe we'll have more to talk about with the next item that's coming up, and if not, we can just take a little bit longer lunch break. So, all right, we will stand in recess. We will be back at 10:40 a.m. Thank you. Okay, calling this strategic planning session meeting back to order. Thank you for sticking with us. So next item on our agenda tonight is under the heading Health and Wellness. Now, Mr. Vanderpool, do you want to kick it off, or should I just hand it right over to our fire chief?
Mayor, you can hand it over to the fire chief.
Okay, so for this, we're going to be talking about the Senior Facilities Paramedic Lift Assist Ordinance, and we have a presentation by our Fire Chief Kevin Edmond and our City Attorney Mark Koszubski, and we'll start with our Chief, Chief Edmond.
Thank you, and good morning, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Vanderpool, and the public in attendance. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to lay out the issue that's in front of us, and Mr. Koszubski is going to follow up with kind of an ordinance that we have for an idea for an ordinance that we have. So during the past several years, 911 calls from specialized living facilities have increased dramatically for non-emergency assistance from fire department personnel. We're experiencing a disproportionate use of our services at certain facilities that should have the ability to respond to the residents' needs. These calls are made in order to secure assistance from the fire department, these lift assists, with physically lifting or moving a resident at the facility, usually because they're on the floor, they can't get up, or it's due to physical ailments or their extreme size. So what exactly is a lift assist? These are pictures of examples of lift assists where people lose their balance and they're on the floor and they need help up. So at elderly facilities, they have equipment that can help them with this if they get these. One, you'll see a Hoyer lift, the other one's blocks, and the other one is a device to help them lift off the floor that their residents could use these with the help of the people that are there. So looking at our historical call volume for lift assists, you can see that our calls are increasing, and you can see the red up there is the elderly assisted facilities. We had a spike in 2019, and this has kind of been decreased down to a kind of a mean average of 240 with the help of our EMS coordinator, Kelly. What I really want to point out is even though these numbers look high, if you look at, you take 240 away from the 1148, that's, approximately about 900. Those are coming from our 50,000 residents. So it's a small relationship versus the 240 that are coming from 26 facilities. So why is this a concern for us? Well, as we go forward, we know that the community is aging. It's been stated that Sterling Heights population of 65 and older will increase by 62% by 2040. So we as an EMS service have to find ways to fix these problems going forward. And we're the safety net for the community. So as we look at the 26 facilities, and each of them was given a number to kind of reference them as we go forward, you can see that certain facilities are using our services more than others. So this is a graph of only the top 10 facilities out of the 26 that we have in the community. There are some facilities that we have that are doing an outstanding job taking care of their residents. So with that, let's look at our EMS transports over time. As you can see, we had a dip there in 2020 with COVID, but as we're going forward, our numbers are going up. These lift assist transports creates a conflict between our core mission of taking care of our residents with our ALS transports and responding to the elderly facility calls that use our services for lift assists and low acuities that could be provided by a private ambulance company. So then let's look at the transports out of the elderly facilities. And what I did is I kind of just figured the green one's the low acuity calls, and that's a roughly conservative 20% of the calls that are coming out there.
What does low acuity mean for those of us who aren't in medical?
A low acuity would be a transport to the hospital that's not chest pains, not a stroke. It may be to go to the hospital because someone's feeding tube fell out, someone's urinary catheter fell out. Those are kind of low acuity calls that aren't a high priority to respond in a quick need with ALS services. So some of these transports are for residents to be transported by ambulance to a healthcare facility despite the lack of urgency or immediate medical need. In short, these facilities and their residents are more and more reliant on city EMS services for these non-emergencies because either they have insufficient staff, They wish to transfer the potential liability to us instead of their staff for lifting, or they cannot secure the services of a private ambulance company. Two of the incidents that we just had in the last 6 months, we responded to one of the facilities to transport a patient because the facility ran out of their medications. So we took them to the ER to get their medications. We've also responded to some of these facilities for patients who have called 911 because they can't make contact with the people that are there. And those are all followed up with the state and other facilities and organizations. So as we go forward, these are the transports out of these facilities. And these are the low acuity calls that we're going. These are all the calls that we're going on. As you can see that there are some facilities that rely on us very heavily and some facilities that don't. And some of the reason that they rely on us is because we're quick and efficient versus a private ambulance service, that they're getting long response times to come. So they'll call us instead. So what that does, in all these incidents, it creates a cost to the city and to the residents, more than simply personnel, equipment, and materials involved. Those costs alone are significant. In addition, the city takes on the associated risk of the tasks of these lift assists due to the possibility that a first responder might be injured when attempting to lift this patient up, which can turn and lead to time off, the ability that we have to replace these people on overtime, workers' comp claims, and other forms of liability. And also when the ambulance is tied up in that response area, that prohibits us from going on actual emergency calls with that particular ambulance. We're sending a fire truck to that location as a first responder. So as we go forward, I'm just looking at the trend of low acuity calls from these facilities, and you can see it's constantly increasing as we go forward in time. So what's the cost? So you can see the cost up there. We have the operational budget, and at the bottom, we've kind of figured out a rough overview of what it costs us to provide that ALS transport of $1,271. So what we're looking at is ways to recoup that. And what I have next for you is one of our lieutenants that's very passionate about this is going to give a video demonstration of what he's encountered.
Hello, I am Lieutenant Wadzinski, and I am a proud member of the Sterling Heights Fire Department. In the past year, I saw an increase in elder neglect, occupancy violations, dealt with social work, and reported 911 abuses more than any other time in my career. From an elderly woman found face down, alone for many hours, only to be found by a visiting home care nurse who called 911 for assistance. It wasn't long after that same call that that fire department responded to lift one of their other residents as he sits contorted, not injured, but in severe discomfort, while staff waits for our help to lift him. Endless stories from the fire department's day-to-day interactions with different healthcare facilities located within our very own city showcases the problems that not only our men and women face during our alarms, but our community is facing from lack of resources. We can continue to talk about the many calls and situations the fire department sees at these facilities, but we need a solution. The same healthcare facilities who charge their patients for pushing a medical button or for a glass of water are charged $0 for the fire department to deliver a service that costs our taxpayers time, money, and resources. And not to mention injuries to our paramedics resulting from these calls. Local 5057 is very thankful for a fair contract, but our value to the community is immeasurable and cannot be priced. In fact, some of our greatest successes are contributed to the approvals by council, such as Lucas CPR pumps, ambulances, electric stretchers and auto loaders, social work, and our amazing mechanics. No doubt that these items have saved countless lives and prevented extreme disabilities in so many of our residents. The fire department is asking for your help with working on what is within your control. Most importantly, more personnel and capable vehicles. Secondly, an ordinance with a way to hold the 911 corporate misuse accountable to the same standard and levels we are held to. We hope to seek additional support and resources from city administration and city council so that we can better serve our community and provide the quality of life to our residents that we pride ourselves in. Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to talk about the ordinance to Mr. Koszybski.
Thank you, Chief. As the Chief noted, the Fire Department provides emergency advanced life support services and transport. Over these last few years, we have noted that the city's emergency responders are being dispatched for lift assist calls and non-emergency transport requests at various residential congregate care and independent living facilities that have their own staff to properly assess and arrange for non-emergency transport services on their own, either as a result of cost-cutting, staffing issues, or an attempt to defray liability. These facilities have begun to rely more and more on the city's 911 emergency life support services to handle these non-emergency situations and/or transports, despite charging the residents a significant monthly fee for staff, amenities, and services that go far beyond normal apartment living. This, frankly, is a drain on city resources and an increased burden on the residents of Sterling Heights. The problem is not unique to Sterling Heights and is becoming more prevalent throughout the country. As a result, more and more communities are enacting ordinances to deter and discourage the burdening of these resources with what are really private sector needs. For example, Houston, Texas has implemented a treatment no transport fee. Tacoma, Washington implements non-emergency lift assistance and a fee as well. Bloomfield Township implemented a lift assist ordinance just in 2019 after just 2 incidents. 2020, Batavia, Illinois has implemented their lift assists. And it's all throughout the country, including Lincoln, Nebraska, and Omaha, Nebraska have enacted similar changes and charges. So what would this look like? Right now, the city currently receives no cost recovery for non-emergency lift assist services at these facilities. Yet the facilities are charging their residents staff, so they could address this. On these non-emergency responses, such as requests for transport of their residents for non-emergency or low acuity calls, the city receives only a minimal fee for the transport, but is simply not made whole. At this time, administration and the fire department are seeking direction from council to further explore these issues and develop an ordinance to address the problem accordingly. Such an ordinance would require a fee for non-emergency lift assistance and non-emergency responses at these facilities to help cover all or part of the costs for inappropriate use of the advanced life support that we provide. The idea would be to recover the cost and or serve as a deterrent for these facilities that have staffing and other options not to abuse 911 calls for these non-emergency services and transport. Ordinance of this type will also serve as a deterrent for misuses of the 911 services, freeing up our ambulances for the actual emergency response personnel emergencies within the city. At this time, the chief and I welcome further costs, but I do want to talk about the anticipated cost recovery on this, because it is important that this has a benefit for the city as well, in that we will be able to recover a lot of the costs associated with this. So the proposed cost recovery from responding to these facilities, based on the historical trends that the chief noted, equate to approximately $400,000. The revenue could be utilized to stand up an EMT team or a low acuity response team that would specialize in basic life support responses and transport. This would again allow our ALS crews the ability to focus on the 911 emergencies and high acuity calls. These funds could also be used to staff a peak time ambulance for firefighters and EMTs in a more cost-effective way to respond to these types of calls. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions along with the chief.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Koszybski. Thank you, Chief Edmond. Before we get into council comments, questions, and discussion, I will open it up to the public, to anyone who'd like to speak on this item. Going once, twice, okay. So I'll open it up now to council. Would like to go first?
So ready.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So I will bring you up in a minute, Chief, but I have a lot to say on this, so bear with me. So as a director of nursing to a nursing facility, I have very much to say on this, and I worked with a private company, and I work for a very private company. I work for Heartland, and they are now ProMedica, and they're in our city, and I know that they're one of our frequent flyers. And I think I talked with the chief when I interviewed him to hire for this, that I had a serious need and a want that I wanted to start working on how we could possibly recoup and cost. But this isn't about cost, this is about use, and this is about abuse, because these residents, number one, have rights. They do have rights to be treated with dignity, they have rights to be treated, and these residents are not being treated in the way that they are paying for. They are not being treated in what they deserve, because they are paying to be treated and to be cared for. And the corporate funding is counting on us as a city to take care of them when they are charging the residents for their care. So this is where I'm passionate about care for patients. I'm passionate about making sure that these people are taken care of. People fall. Residents fall all the time. My residents that I take care of fall. I have never, ever had to call in the township where I work, which is up north in Clarkston, Springfield Township. We do not call for falls. We take care of our residents. We have the Hoyer lifts. We have the staff. We make sure that we pick our gentlemen up. I only take care of men. We pick our men up off the floor. We have never called to transport for medication. We take care of the men that we are taking care of. And this is where I see that what the companies here, the facilities here in Sterling Heights are doing, it's an abuse. They get paid over $4,000 a month just for basic care for each resident. And they are staffing minimally and expect, as the lieutenant said, these people fall and they're left crumpled on the floor, and the staff they put a blanket over them and they say, oh, we're going to call Sterling Heights and wait for them to get there. Or an EMS service if that's who they decide to call. That is absolutely, in my opinion, criminal. They should not be leaving these people on the floor. They should not be leaving them slip and fall into the bathroom. They're leaving them cold and wet, naked some of the times. I know what these gentlemen and ladies from EMS see when they get there. I do not want to see that happen. I am completely in favor of charging them, because at the end of the day, these are companies, these are corporations that own the facilities, and their biggest motivator is the dollar. So if we have a charge, $800 is not our cost. It's not going to recoup all of our money. This isn't about the money. This is about the rights of the patient. This is about the right thing to do, is to find a way to motivate them to do the right thing. And money is probably their only motivator. So I'm in complete support of at least getting them to do the right thing. So I obviously am in full support. So I think I'll leave it there for now, but I may want a second bite at the apple. Thank you, Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mrs. Srowski. Anyone else? Mr. Yanis?
I'm equally excited as my colleague, Mrs. Srowski, to talk about this issue. I will say that I mean, I've been gone from the fire department for 10 years, and this is not a new story. Mm-hmm. We did this. It's not uncommon, and people have to understand. They'll call the facility, which these are referred to, by the way, as skilled nursing facilities. Mm-hmm. Skilled nursing facilities, keep that in mind. They're basically long-term care, something a hospital does, but long-term care, they have registered nurses that take care of their patients, or they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And what quite often happens is somebody needs to go to the hospital for a minor reason. They call the private ambulance company. The private ambulance company says it'll be 2 hours because they're not a priority, and they don't want to wait 2 hours. So now all of a sudden they got chest pain or difficulty breathing, and they call 911. And then we have to take an ambulance out of our city that, you know, could actually be responding to a true emergency because they simply don't want to wait. We have a lot of seniors, and we talked about how our community is getting older. We have a lot of seniors who still live in their house. We have, it's not uncommon to have a senior couple. One is ill, one is not, and one is taking care of the other. And they are responsible for taking care of all the needs, including when they fall. And I will tell you, one of the most rewarding parts of my job was when you went on that call at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and you help that senior couple with the need of that patient who fell, that person who fell, just putting them back in bed, checking them out, making sure they're okay. Incredibly rewarding. But on the same page, incredibly frustrating when you have a skilled nursing facility, for-profit company that is abusing the public fire department simply because their staff's not trained, they don't have enough staff, whatever the reason is. And we have had firefighters hurt on the job. Backs have been hurt, shoulders have been hurt, doing lift assists that the facility should be doing. So I just had to get that off my chest. Through the chair to the chief. Oh, you got a microphone right there where you're sitting. Very good. Chief, when it comes to responding to medical emergencies, what role does the county medical authority have?
Well, thank you for that question. The county medical authority is basically establishes our protocols and our procedures to respond. And then we're in conversations with them right now and ways to deal with this. And when we have a situation where an elderly person is not taken care of, we will file those reports with state agencies to make sure that that gets followed up. So again, the medical direction kind of helps us, guide us in our medical treatment and plans as we go forward.
And who oversees the county medical authority? Do you know?
It's the state, the Department of EMS oversees all the little county agencies that are set up that then oversee the area departments or EMS providers.
Do you know if that authority also comes under some directive or funding from either our county board or county executive? Do you know that? If you don't, that's fine, but.
Yeah, the medical control for Macomb County does get funding from the county authority.
Okay, so the county board could apply some leverage when it comes to funding, right? Would it help, I think I already know the answer to this question, but would it help if private ambulance companies communicated with the city when they are called into our city to respond to a non-emergency run? So that you would know that they got called in case you got called for the same run, only it's an emergency now.
Yeah, that cooperation would help, and we have reached out to Universal Ambulance to see if they are getting these calls instead of us, because it's more appropriate for them to handle it than us to handle it. So we have had those communications, but it's not on a day-to-day basis where, we know who's getting called or not called.
So if there was a system in place that MedStar, MedStar? Am I living in the past? It is MedStar, right?
Well, MedStar does Clinton
Yeah,
Township
but-
and occasionally some facilities in our
Yeah,
area.
I'm just
Yes.
saying a private, let me withdraw any names. A private ambulance company, if there was some system in place to contact a municipal provider, that could be helpful in determining what's a true emergency, what isn't.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
And, my understanding is that these facilities are no longer licensed or certified by the state. Is that true?
It depends on which facility you're talking about. If it's a nursing home, the nursing homes are licensed by the state. The places that call them assisted living, those are the ones that don't have state oversight.
Okay. Assisted living. And when you file these complaints with the state, what kind of response? How is it determined at the end? What's the resolution?
So when we file these complaints, an investigation takes place and all the parties involved, both us and the facility, have an opportunity to tell their side of the story. And then that officer that's appointed by the state will then go into figuring out what the resolution of that is. Sometimes it's a fine, sometimes it's don't do that again. You know, there's different levels of resolution to those incidences.
Thank you, Chief. So, Mr. Mayor and fellow council, I'm in full agreement of trying to pass some sort of ordinance. You know, we have a facility in our city. I live right by it, so I hear the sirens coming all the time. I think it was told to me that our fire department has responded there almost every single day during a 365-day period, correct? Over 400 runs in a 365-day period, which is just incredibly infuriating and frustrating that they would abuse us like that. It just so happens that this same for-profit company is based out of Ohio, and they have a highway named after them.
Right.
They have a highway named after them. Why are they not paying? We need to implement this thing. We need to give our people, we need to give our firefighters some relief from these calls, especially the ones where they're being forced to get up in the middle of the night and interrupting their sleep, so they can focus on the true emergencies that the taxpayers of this city pay for. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Taylor?
Mr. Radke first, we'll get you next.
Sorry. Just very briefly, I completely agree with Mr. Yanez and Mrs. Sarowski. It's unbelievable that 24 facilities, but even a handful of the 24 are, I guess you'd say, almost 25% of our low acuity run volume, that they are essentially subsidizing their profits on the backs of our firefighters and paramedics. I guess, to the chair, to the chief, when we go and transport or have to do a lift assist, how long does an ambulance usually go out of service to take care of this run or this call?
Thank you for the question. A lift assist may take 20 to 30 minutes. A transport's going to take about 45 minutes to an hour.
And when our ambulances have to do a transport or a lift assist, essentially, do we reposition resources within the city, or do we have to lean on shared, what's the word I'm thinking about?
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid, thank you, between our local communities to service our regular run volume?
So it all depends on what our call load is for that time period when we're handling these low acuity calls. There are times that we will lean on Utica and Shelby to come in and assist us on some things. There's other times that we lean on other fire stations to cover that first due area of that ambulance that provided that low acuity run or lift assist call.
And I guess just, I'm curious, are these calls mostly during the working hours, during the day when these facilities should be staffed? Are they mostly at night, or do they vary?
They vary.
Well, to me, it seems that a very small number of facilities are just abusing our firefighters, essentially, and I'm all in favor of charging them, because if they're misusing 911, I would hate to see some real emergency in Sterling Heights happen where our firefighters are unavailable to assist them because they are otherwise occupied. You've done a lot of work to get some of these facilities in line, and I think the rest, when they see the dollar signs, will hopefully, you know, it's not to be punitive. It's literally to say, we are expending resources, assisting you. It is time for you to be a good corporate citizen and pay up. So I am totally in favor of this. I'm glad you brought this before us, and I hope to see it soon. All I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I'm on board with this as well. For a while now, we've been talking about this low acuity response team. I think this is well past the point of needing that. However, I'm going to be devil's advocate here and say that some of these facilities will probably gladly pay the fees instead of come in compliance, because it will be cheaper than finding staff, and that's really unfortunate. Not only does it take an ambulance out of commission, typically a truck goes along too. So that's wear and tear on our trucks, our ambulances, those staff, and taking two apparatuses out of commission for lift assist. As far as, you know, before we even started this conversation, I looked at Ms. Sarowski and I said, you know, all they need is a Hoyer lift. And that was like one of the first things that you mentioned. it's a matter of training in those facilities, and it's unconscionable that this goes on. As far as transport, when Mr. Yanez, when you were a firefighter, had we started transport, Mr. Yanez?
We had not.
Okay, so that is a big difference. They weren't using our resources, but they were using our trucks because the truck would respond as well.
Just so I can, they were using our resources other than actually transporting the patient to the hospital. As you pointed out, they were using, we had to send an engine.
Correct.
And 4 men.
Right.
To that response. The only difference was we had private ambulance carriers. So it just, you're right, it has compounded.
Right. So, this ordinance not only protects the residents in those facilities, hopefully, it protects all of our residents because it makes those resources more readily available. And it protects our employees, and it also protects our very expensive equipment that we have to maintain and continue to upgrade and buy because of runs that they don't necessarily need to take. I will tell you a short story. My neighbor across the street had a very ill son she was caring for. He was in a skilled nursing facility within our city. They discharged him to her home. He fell going in, did an army crawl into the house, and the skilled nursing facility said, "Don't worry, if he ever falls, just call the fire department. That's what they're there for." So that is what they're telling people when they're being discharged from their skilled facilities. This is long overdue. I'm on board for doing this, and I really think that we need to look at that low acuity response team as well. I have nothing further.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Anyone else? Mrs. Arco?
Just to say that I'm on board with this too. I have to tell you, what concerns, I think the first thing we need to say is that all 7 of us sitting up here would say we want people that are either living in our city or being treated in our city to have, the necessary health care that they need while they're here. But the other thing is I live so close to Station 4 that I hear those ambulances run all day long. And I can tell you there's 3 different spots that they go to. And it depends on which direction they're going to turn or go straight on 15 and Shaner. So it depends whether they're going to an American House. It depends on if it's Paramedic. It depends on if it's Metalodge. But I do know that our guys are there. And I'm glad you explained to us the difference in an assisted living facility and how it is licensed or whatever in a nursing home. Because that was going to be one of my questions so through the chair to Chief, is there an inspection that goes on in the assisted living facilities like there is an inspection for nursing homes? Or are they pretty much, whatever the residents that are in need of is taken care of, but there's no actual regulations for those facilities?
So in the state of Michigan, there is no regular rules that cover assisted living as there is in other states. There are strict guidelines and rules that cover nursing homes within our state of Michigan. So the state fire marshal will come out and do the inspection at a nursing home, and they'll advise us if they're there. We have to take care of the assisted living places. That's another avenue that we're looking at is how do we enact locally some of those processes that will make the businesses within our community a better place for our residents.
So that might be something we want to bring up as far as regulations for assisted livings when we have the roundtable this afternoon. That might be something that would be a good topic of conversation. So yes, you've answered my question there. But just like when the news, they have little teasers. Do you just want to give us a little teaser about something you've been working on that's ground medical emergency transport that you're going to bring up later so that, some of us can think about until this afternoon?
Yeah, what that is, it's a federal program that will help us increase our Medicaid reimbursement rates that we receive. It's an ambulance supplemental payment, and I'll discuss more about that this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Mrs. Konski, anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
I will just share a little bit. Through the chair to the chief, exactly how is this ordinance going to work? Do you plan on contacting these facilities and offer training to them? Possibly charge them for the training? Is that going to be part of this? And then you said that they would bill the facility, and the facility would then have to charge the patient, or will the patient's insurance come into play to pay any of these fees?
Okay, there was many questions there. Let me take them one at a time. As any time that we institute anything in the fire department, we're going to make sure that we talk to the business communities. We have decreased our calls there through the efforts of our EMS coordinator. So we will make sure that we do more education if possible for them, and we can always make sure that we recover our costs when we give them that education. We look this to be more of a deterrent than actually a moneymaker for us. We want to make sure that they're taking care of their residents properly is what it comes down to, as far as that goes. Now, as far as the insurance part of it, that normally isn't covered by insurance, a lift assist call. So we're asking the facility to do that and not pass it along to the residents, but unfortunately, I can't control what they do or they don't do.
Now, this ordinance will apply to the facilities. What about a resident?
This would not apply to the residents. What we're going to try to do in this ordinance is define what these facilities are, and then assess a cost recovery for going there. This is really geared for facilities that should be providing a service to their residents, and we'll help them. You know, if they don't know what equipment to buy, you know, we'll lead them in the right direction. If they need training, we'll lead them in the right direction. We really want them to be responsible for their residents, just as we're responsible for all of our residents in the community.
And that was my question. What do we do for our residents? This is the service that we provide.
Yeah, if a resident needs help in getting up, we'll go out there and we'll help them, just like Councilman Yanish says. That's a pride for a lot of our folks to be able to help them. If there's a situation that we encounter where a resident needs more help, we'll hook up them with our social worker or try to provide them avenues to get the help they need to make sure they're taken care of.
A few lessons in how to get up if you've fallen.
Yeah, that's something as we go forward, and part of that federal dollars is hopefully to provide additional resources for us and staffing that we can go out with a public education specialist and actually teach our residents how they can get up off the floor, and also maybe partner with Parks and Rec for some exercises and stuff.
I was going to say maybe the senior facility here, you could give a couple classes to teach our seniors what to do and how to get up off the floor if they've fallen.
Absolutely, that's something that we need to do.
Sounds like you've got some work to do. Thank you.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes, Ms. Sarko?
Excuse me. I even have it circled here and I didn't say anything because this is strategic planning. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it has to do with what I would like from the fire department, and that's CPR classes for our residents. And I know that probably 3 or 4 years ago, the Dayton Airport actually has a kiosk. It would be similar to the videos that you would see when you're pumping your gas. And in the video, it would show somebody how to do CPR. And there were 2 people that were on a flight delay that actually witnessed this, and you might have been even working in Ohio when that happened. But what they witnessed this, and within 2 weeks, they saved somebody's life because of watching that video. So those are things that I think that, you know what, if we're talking about health and wellness and safety, I think we could put that into what we want to do here. Nothing further.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate the presentation. I know something we've been talking about for a number of years. Obviously, a lot of comments and supportive of this, so I think it looks like we're going to be moving forward with this. A couple questions that I have are, can you elaborate any more on the type of facilities where these major runs are happening for both lift assist and EMS transports? It's kind of interesting to me that there's not much overlap between the top three, right? So one is, in one group, a lot of facilities are having lift assists, and the other group, there's a lot of transports. So does it have to do, I mean, I don't want you to say anything that's going to reveal what these facilities are, but, or identify them by name so much, but are you seeing a difference based on whether they're independent or assisted living versus nursing and memory care, or does it vary just across the board?
Thanks for that question. It varies across the board. It really depends on the care that's being provided by that facility. That's the key in all this, is some facilities in our community do an outstanding job taking care of the residents, and some need a little help.
What about, just the amount of patients or residents that live in the facility? Does that skew the numbers at all? So for example, if the top 10 facilities, the top 3 are the biggest facilities in Sterling Heights, maybe it's not so much a problem with the service that they're providing, it's just that there's so much volume because there's more people. Does that have any role in this?
It really doesn't. It's more based on the facility and their ability to care for the patients. We have some facilities that have large numbers that do an outstanding job.
Interesting. Well, that's very good perspective. And then I guess what I'm curious about is, are we looking, so obviously this ordinance, the goal would be to continue providing the residents with the type of services that they need, whether it's provided by the fire department or provided by the facility where they're residing, right? And as an incentive to get the facilities to do this themselves, we're going to be charging them, as was outlined. Do you guys have, and maybe Mr. Koszubski, you would know, do you have an estimate? Well, let me, I guess, phrase it this way. If this ordinance is implemented, would it apply to all retirement facilities across the city? Or would they be able to sort of opt out of it if they provide the service themselves? How would it work? Would they get, I guess, would they just get charged per run? So then there's no reason to opt in or opt out. So why don't you answer that? It's just they're charged per run, right?
Yeah, that's what we would look at it. As we go through the type of call that's there, we would assess it. It's sort of very similar to a false alarm ordinance to bring people into compliance with what they need to do. So we would assess the run. Was it a valid run? Was it a situation that we need to do the cost recovery and then apply that $800 fee is what we would do. So there really wouldn't be an opt-in or opt-out. And part of it, as we bring this forward, is we want to define what these facilities are so everybody knows, and then we go and have these communications with them prior to enacting that, any fines or any cost recovery mechanisms.
Okay, so the goal would be then if facilities know that they're going to get charged $800 every time they call to have somebody lifted, the idea is that maybe in the future they'll just provide that service themselves. They probably would be able to do it more efficiently depending on the number of, like if you've got 250 lift assists, let's say 225 lift assists. I mean, that facility at 1,000, it's going to be 220,000. So at 80, it's going to be $175,000. I mean, you might as well hire somebody, right? That would be their only job. You could pay somebody $150,000 a year whose only job is to make sure that they're working with staff to get people the support they need immediately, right now, right? And that's sort of the goal, I think. The goal is to get them these services to, as Mrs. Surowski was saying, like, why should they be laying there in pain, maybe in an uncomfortable position, maybe in varying levels of undress, that waiting for our fire department to arrive when a member on staff at the facility can provide them that same service right away? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to have the facility take care of it, is what our ultimate goal is.
And it's not like you need people with, muscular people or people with superhuman strength. I mean, you've got examples in here of equipment that is used that can help, right? So if the facilities just invest in the equipment to provide that service, that would seem to be the best outcome. I know we've talked about in the past conceptually, and maybe it was just my personal conversations with city administration and maybe the former fire chief, that there was the possibility for an ordinance that would essentially be an assessment across the board to all of these facilities in a pro rata amount that we would collect every year regardless of the number of runs. So we've gone away from that model and more towards a cost per use model. Is that fair?
I would like Mr. Koszybski to weigh in on that one.
Mr. Koszybski.
Thank you, Mayor. That's actually a great question because we did do some extensive research on that. As you know, it's been an issue for a lot of years, but when you do a across-the-board fee, it's essentially a tax because it's, you can charge your cost for use, but you can't just create a flat charge we're going to assess with everyone that has these types of facilities. That would be a tax.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. I guess one final comment I'll make is that, not to come to the defense of these facilities, but I appreciate what my colleagues are saying. I think they've abused the taxpayers, not so much abused the fire department. The fire department is there, that's what they do, and they'll continue to do it. And of course, our firefighters, they make what they make, regardless of whether we're charging the facility or not. But really what it boils down to me, is that we offer this service. The facilities know we offer the service. We offer it to them for free right now, so they take advantage of it, just like any one of us would. If somebody's offering us a very valuable service for free and we need the service, of course, we're going to take them up on it. But ultimately, it's the taxpayers who are funding our fire department. And our taxpayers have given us the marching orders that they want the best fire department that's absolutely possible, that money can buy, and we believe that we're delivering on that, but we need to rectify this imbalance where certain high volume users are getting more for their tax dollars than the residents out there, and I think it's time that we do something about it. So I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the plan and the comments from, this was a good one because we've got a director of nursing services. We got a former firefighter. Everybody, I think, has valuable input for this problem, and I think we're going to get it solved. So anyone else, any comments on this? Any final questions? You're looking at me like you do.
Well, which one of us?
Mrs. Zarko.
Well, you know what? I'm going to give you an example. A week ago Saturday, there was a rollover accident on the side of my house. It involved 3 cars. With those 3 cars came, I want to say for sure, 2 ambulances and possibly a 3rd. And when you take that many ambulances out of service and you have somebody that's calling you for a lift, there's an injustice there. It's just not right. So I'm fully in support of this. I was just, thinking of that as an example.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanez.
I'm sorry. So I'm, I want to make sure that we're not beating a dead horse here, but I do want to just respond. First of all, I don't want us in the lift assist business, because every time you take an ambulance away to do a lift assist, even if we have an agreement with the facility, that ambulance now is tied up, and should a true emergency, and I remember a day I had back-to-back-to-back CPRs. We had two of the 4 of us were gone to the hospital with CPRs. We had to do a 2-man CPR and wait for the ambulance to show up. Those things are, although they're rare, they happen. And if, somebody's having a heart attack and there's a 2, 3, 4 minute delay, and heaven forbid it's, bad weather and the delay's longer because the ambulance is doing a lift assist, that doesn't help the true emergency. We're here to respond to true emergencies, and yes, we do good deeds. We pick people up, citizens and homeowners and so forth. I mean, I just recently did a lift assist on one of my participants on my Meals on Wheels route, which just made me realize how much older I am than when I worked at the fire department, because I thought I was going to have to call 911. I just, we need to make sure that when we do this, that people understand that we mean business. We're not there to be abused. I think somebody is absolutely right that they'll look at this and go, you know what? I don't have to pay overtime. I don't have to pay health care. I don't have to pay. I'll pay the fine. And I don't want them doing that either. Our people are there to serve the people of citizens of Sterling Heights and not fulfill the corporate needs of people who just don't want to pay good wages, don't want to train their employees. And as somebody pointed out here, staff, they're not trained. I don't want to say they're trained, but staff knows to call 911. Not my job. Pick somebody up. And usually when you pick somebody up, there's more than just them laying on the floor that's going on as well. And I'll leave that at that. But I think we need to be very careful and very direct on how we go forward with this to let facilities know we're not here to be abused. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Taylor, one final comment.
Mrs. Strowski.
Thank you. And just to kind of piggyback on what Councilman Yanez said, if we do have bad actors that continue to abuse our system, as Ms. Schmidt pointed out, this is an ordinance and we have a set fee. There is an option to always go further. We could raise the fee, we could do other things. So there is options. So that's all the point I just wanted to make. Thank you.
Mr. Radke.
Briefly, through the chair to the chief, what do we estimate the actual cost of a lift assist is? If it's the $800 fine or fee for the assist, it costs us more? Am I right in saying that? $12.71? I must have missed that part. So that's my curiosity. I listened to what the mayor said about licensing these facilities or charging them a fee, but I think, at least my colleagues can be in agreement, I want to target the bad actors. Some of these facilities seem to be doing the right thing or attempting to do the right thing by coming more in line. I think if we were to try to do a set fee across, we're treating the good actors and the bad actors in the same fashion. And we obviously have about 5 facilities that are really bad actors. Let's target them and leave the people who are doing what they should be doing alone. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one final comment. Mrs. Koski brought up a great point about these facilities potentially billing the patients in the long run. That too, I think is, it's not the patient's fault they fell. It's not the patient's fault that the facility is not doing their job. Just another unethical thing that could be happening in these facilities that maybe the department that Mr. Yanez had referred to at the county level or the state level needs to look into as well. And as far as education, maybe SHTV could do an educational video for our seniors that could be on SHTV, that could be advertised that it's going to be on SHTV in the papers and in, other avenues, just to help them educate themselves on how to get up when you've fallen. I know the facilities probably won't show them, but, everything we can do to put more education out there is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Mrs. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to the chief, just one more question. These are non-emergency. What if a patient falls in a facility? Who is going to determine whether they have a head injury or, of course, what I'm hearing all the time is be careful. You don't get a brain bleed because that can kill you, because that's what happened to my brother-in-law. How are we going to determine whether the facility is capable of judging whether this is a life-threatening fall or a non-emergency fall, just pick them up? That's where I'm a little confused. Is it up to them to decide whether they need us, Sterling Heights Ambulance, or if they should just pick them up themselves and put them back into bed or back into the chair?
That's a great question. One of the things as we go forward with this ordinance, and this comes back to defining what those facilities that should be providing those care, the facilities that may not have the medical staff there to evaluate them. That's something that we can go out and do. That's something that we can train them to do, to go, here's where, you know, a basic emergency first aid could come in place, and to educate them about that and when to call us and when not to call us. Because if there's any question that there's a true emergency that is happening to that individual, by all means dial 911, and then we'll come and figure that out. But this is to get ahead of the game for those places that are just kind of overusing us, that have the education and training that they should be performing these services.
So basically, what the fire department will do is determine whether it is a non-emergency where they should have taken care of it themselves, or if it's an actual emergency. So if it's a non-emergency and they didn't do it, then you're going to bill them. But if it's an emergency, then you will transport or handle it as always.
Yeah, exactly. This really works just like our false alarm ordinance. When we go on a call and a fire alarm goes off, we look at the reasons for it as to whether that facility gets charged. And in our false alarm ordinance, there is an escalating factor, and this is kind of the same type of methodology that we're using with these lift assist calls.
So 1, 2, 3, and you're out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You want number 4? That's okay. It's a good discussion, and we are still ahead of time. But I will say we can leave it at that. Mr. Vanderpool, do you have anything to wrap us up before our lunch break?
Mayor, just a concluding comment first. We expect the ordinance to come to City Council in March. That's our goal. And secondly, as the chief mentioned, this is kind of patterned after our false alarm ordinance, and there will be an appeal process. So individuals, if they feel that we unjustly might have charged them, there is a process to appeal. And some of those appeals on the false alarm ordinance are granted. But thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. So we are ahead of time, but not by a lot. We were supposed to conclude this at 12 and then have a lunch break from 12 to 12:30, which I thought was maybe about 15 minutes too short. So we're gonna, I would say, let's break right now. It's 11:39, and plan on coming back to jump into the sustainability and refuse contract update presentation promptly at 12:30 p.m. So we will stand in recess for 50 minutes and return at 12:30 p.m.